Chapter 641, Coward. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Hearing a shout from behind, the cyan-robed elder suddenly slowed down and looked back. All of the indoor disciples behind him also stopped. A skinny young disciple saw Zhang Yuochen's figure and said hoarsely, "Junior Uncle Master, it's elder brother Lin Yue." Elder Zhao Yibing snorted and said, "Don't pay attention to him. Let's go. Our yin and yang sect doesn't have such a disciple like him." With a look of aversion, Zhao Yibing flicked his sleeves and led more than 10 disciples to move forward quickly. Initially, Lin Yue was so scared by Zhang Yuochen that he kneeled down to beg for mercy outside the Cyan Cloud County, which was terribly embarrassing. Even his junior sister apprentices, who always crushed on him, despised him now. Besides that, he betrayed Zhao Yibing, and as a result, Zhang Yuochen took away Zhao Yibing's treasure hunting compass. Thus, Zhao Yibing naturally looked down upon Lin Yue. He had planned to report to Lin Yue's master to expel him when he returned back. Seeing Lin Yue again, none of them gave him a good look but turned away, disdaining to associate with Lin Yue. Zhang Yuochen certainly knew the reason, but he still chased after them as bold as brass. Zhang Yuochen had no alternative. Although he had changed into Lin Yue, he did not know Lin Yue's status in the Yin and Yang sect. He also did not know his address, his master, or his friends. If he did not try to find out what the situation was, he would be exposed easily. But how should he find out about the situation? Of course, he would find out about it through the group in front of him. He caught up to them quickly and said with a bright smile, "Junior Uncle Master, junior sister apprentices, why are you hiding from me? I had a difficult time catching up to you." Humphrey. Lin Yue, you killed Serene Blue, emissary of the Black Market Excellence Hall. You're too famous, so I don't dare be your junior uncle master. Zhao Yibing sneered. The news that Lin Yue killed Serene Blue emissary had spread throughout the entire eastern region. His name was well known all over the world. However, those who knew him did not believe it. Serene Blue emissary was an evil dominator. How was an indoor disciple in the completion of Heaven Realm able to fight against him? Everyone including Zhao Yibing thought that Lin Yue had been quite lucky to pick up Serene Blue emissary's body, and then he even said without shame that he killed Serene Blue emissary by himself. In order to become famous, he had been unscrupulous, and a man such as this was disgusting. Zhang Yuochen pretended that he could not understand Zhao Yibing's words. He said with a smile, "No matter how famous and powerful I am, you'll always be my junior uncle master." Really shameless. A clear voice came from behind Zhao Yibing. Zhang Yuochen looked over and saw Zhao Hana. Then, he appeared as if he was valiant like Lin Yue normally did and said with laughter, "Junior sister apprentice, I haven't seen you for a long time. I missed you so much." Zhang Yuochen knew that Lin Yue was on good terms with Zhao Hana, so he tried to cozy up to her first. Zhao Hana was about 16 or 17 years old. She was elegant and beautiful, and with a pair of round eyes, she looked extremely cute. If she had heard him say "I missed you so much" before, she would definitely have been excited for several days. However, when she witnessed him kneeling down in front of an evil master, mortally afraid of death, she had lost all longing and infatuation for Lin Yue. Now, when she heard Lin Yue say such words, she wondered how she could have been so absolutely blind to have had a crush on such a coward. Zhao Hana crossed her arms and squinted at Zhang Yuochen. She said indifferently, "Keep away from me. Don't call me junior sister apprentice, otherwise, I'll get very sick." Several indoor disciples standing around Zhao Hana suddenly sneered and stared at him with disdain. They felt unspeakable happiness. Zhao Hana's eyes had been completely full of Lin Yue before, and they were inferior to him whether in talent or appearance, so they did not dare to battle with him for Zhao Hana. But now, it was totally different. Obviously, she did not have a crush on Lin Yue anymore. Thus, they naturally thought they had a chance. Everyone deliberately alienated Lin Yue and even relentlessly mocked him. However, Lin Yue did not mind at all and followed them shamelessly. Zhao Yibing led a group of indoor disciples to leave Shentai City and go to the mountain gate of the Yin and Yang sect. The mountain gate was two side-by-side Yellowstone mountain peaks. From a distant place, they looked like two wide-open gates, being both lofty and archaic. In front of the two peaks were 9 long lines of people. All of them were disciples on their return to the sect. Most of them were white-robed outer disciples, and a few were blue-robed indoor disciples. All those people who were able to be apprentices in the Yin and Yang sect and practiced there had an imposing appearance and extraordinary bearing. Even the outer disciples were active and progressive. All hail Junior Uncle Master Zhao. The disciples who guarded the mountain gate recognized Zhao Yibing and immediately saluted him with a fist held in the palm. Because Zhao Yibing was leading the way, the disciples who guarded the mountain gate did not check their tokens at all but just let them through directly. While entering the mountain gate, they felt a rush of heaven and earth spiritual chi. Soaring lofty mountains appeared in front of them, and on the mountains were palaces and Taoist temples. Powerful savage beasts flew among the mountains and roared. It looked like an immortal holy land. I have something to report to the law enforcement elder. Zhao Hana, Xuchen, you go to Long Living Yard first. Before departing, Zhao Yibing glared at Zhang Yuochen coldly. Then, he sat on an argali beast's back, flew from the ground, and disappeared into the sky. The Yin and Yang sect was divided into 3 palaces and 72 yards. Zhao Yibing, Lin Yue, and Zhao Hana were disciples of Long Living Yard. Zhang Yuochen went over to Zhao Hana as he watched Zhao Yibing's departure. He asked, "Why is Junior Uncle Master going to find the law enforcement elder?" Zhao Hana did not give Zhang Yuochen a good look. She snorted, "What else can he do? He's going to report the event about the immortal vampires." Zhang Yuochen felt a flicker of interest and guessed that Orange Star emissary must have spread the information that the immortal vampires had escaped from Manji Island. To confirm his guess, Zhang Yuochen pretended to be puzzled. Immortal vampires? What immortal vampires? Zhao Hana rolled her eyes and looked off to the side. Junior sister apprentice, ignore him. Let's go. Xuchen went over, pulled Zhao Hana by the sleeve, and headed for Long Living Yard. Xuchen was an indoor disciple of Long Living Yard. He had reached the completion of Heaven Realm and was talented in practicing. Previously, he had always followed after Lin Yue and did not dare to cast an eye on Zhao Hana. But now, it was totally different. He knew that Lin Yue had offended Junior Uncle Master Zhao, so he thought that Lin Yue would come to no good end. He predicted that Lin Yue would be expelled soon. So, he naturally did not fear Lin Yue but prepared to pursue Zhao Hana openly. Zhang Yuochen crossed his arms, shook his head, and forced a smile. He followed them again and climbed up Zixia Sacred Mountain of Long Living Yard with his junior fellow apprentices and junior sister apprentices, including Zhao Hana and Xuchen. Zixia Sacred Mountain ranked 3rd among the 4 sacred mountains of Long Living Yard. There were a total of 220 indoor disciples. It was worth mentioning that except for a few gifted disciples, only those people who had reached the Heaven Realm could become indoor disciples. In other words, there were more than 200 Heaven Realm warriors on Zixia Sacred Mountain. And besides them, many talented outer disciples were selected to practice on the sacred mountain. On the way to the mountain top, outer disciples who were doing sword practice could be seen everywhere. Some stood at the edge of the cliff, some stood on rocks, and some stood at the tops of pines. Those people who were able to practice on Zixia Sacred Mountain, even the outer disciples, also had reached the Earth Realm. Zhang Yuochen secretly exclaimed that the Yin and Yang sect was really the leader of all the sects. Even just a sacred mountain of theirs had such powerful strength, which was really startling. After returning to Zixia Sacred Mountain, the indoor disciples separated and went back to their own courtyards. "You live in the Spiritual Wind Pavilion. Why are you still following me?" Zhao Hana turned around and stared at Zhang Yuochen. "So, Lin Yue lived in the Spiritual Wind Pavilion," Zhang Yuochen thought inwardly as he nodded lightly. Without saying a word, he turned around directly and released his spiritual power to search for the Spiritual Wind Pavilion. Zhao Hana did not know that Zhang Yuochen was looking for the Spiritual Wind Pavilion with spiritual power. Seeing that he was driven to distraction, she thought he was really hurt because he was being marginalized. She suddenly felt pity for Lin Yue and wanted to say sorry to him. "Junior sister apprentice, let's go." Xuchen came over to her, glanced at Zhang Yuochen's back, and said with cold eyes, "Lin Yue is a coward. Not only you, but I also misjudged him before. Tui, wait and see. The Lord will definitely expel him. While he was speaking, Xu Chen spat out a mouthful of saliva on the ground. Zhao Han sighed and left with Xu Chen. In the end, she did not chase after him. Zhang Yuochen did not care what the disciples of the Yin and Yang sect thought about him. After all, Lin Yue was highly talented and looked handsome, but actually, he was a coward. He still had something more important to do, so he did not need to waste any time on them. The Spiritual Wind Pavilion. Zhang Yuochen stood outside a courtyard of 3 acres and looked up at the wooden horizontal inscribed board above the door. He said to himself, this must be it. Lin Yue was a warrior on the heaven board and the top master among the Xixius Sacred Mountain indoor disciples. He would naturally be treated better than other indoor disciples. This courtyard alone was enough to make other indoor disciples envious.